Hey y'all, I want to show you this plant real quick. Look at that, it's called the Night Blooming Series, and it blooms occasionally at night. And you can watch it bloom and the flower dies in half an hour or so. The plants are in because it's supposed to snow. Ow! It's supposed to snow tonight in Louisiana for the first time since 1963. But anyway, today I'm gonna read to you from the Metamorphosis. Cats, you better back off. Of Ovid. And this is gonna be a synoptical view. So we're not reading the actual thing, we're gonna read a synopsis of it, or just a short telling of what it's about. So we're gonna cover a lot really quickly, but I want you to see how it's about the Old Testament. Check out this picture. Cool picture. Can anybody tell me what this is a picture of? Who is that? What's up with these tree ladies? They don't seem to be happy to be trees. What the heck is this about? Hinchcliffe. Ugh. I can't read that. Okay. So when I read this, first of all, I was disappointed that it was not the actual Metamorphoses. But then I was pretty pleased to be able to just read about it like this and cover so much so quickly. So, a synoptical view of the principal transformations mentioned in the Metamorphosis, Book 1. Chaos is divided by the deity into 4 elements. To these, their respective inhabitants are assigned, and man is created from earth and water. The 4 ages follow, and in the last of these, the giants aspire to the sovereignty of the heavens. Being slain by Jupiter, a new race of men springs up from their blood. These becoming noted for their impiety, Jupiter not only transforms Lycaon into a wolf. Ooh, is that where we get the word lichen from? But destroys the whole race of men and animals by a deluge, with the exception of the Diolcalion and Pyra, who, when the waters have abated, renew the human race by throwing stones behind them. Other animated beings are produced by heat and moisture, and among them the serpent Python. Phobos slays him and institutes the Pythian Games as a memorial of the event, in which the conquerors are crowned with beech. For as yet the laurel does not exist, into which Daphne is changed soon after, while flying from Phobos. On this taking place, the other rivers repair to her father Peneus, either to congratulate or to console him. But Inachus is not there, as he is grieving for his daughter Io, whom Jupiter, having first ravished her, has changed into a cow. She is entrusted by Juno to the care of Argus, Mercury having first related to him the transformation of the nymph Syrinx into reeds, slays him, on which his eyes are placed by Juno in the tail of the peacock. Io, having recovered human shape, becomes the mother of Epaphras. Okay, so be on the lookout for symbols that are remarkably similar to the Old Testament. Because, brothers and sisters, we're going to see together how these stories are all the same. We've already looked at one of the stories in the Edda and cross-referenced it with Psalm 82 and John 10 in the New Testament. And we're going to see how this is all one story, which is a true story, by the way. The story of us, the story of how we came to be in the world as it is today. Book 2, Epaphras, having accused Phaeton of falsely asserting that Phobos is his father, Phaeton requests Phobos, as a proof of his affection towards his child, to allow him guidance of the chariot of the sun for one day. This being granted, the whole earth is set on fire by him, and the Ethiopians are turned black by the heat. Jupiter strikes Phaeton with a thunderbolt, and while his sisters and his kinsmen Cycnus are lamenting him, the former are changed into trees, and Cucnus into a swan. On visiting the earth, that he may repair the damage caused by the conflagration, Jupiter sees Callisto, and assuming the form of Diana, he debauches her. Whoa. Okay, so Jupiter assumes the form of Diana, and Diana is the goddess of the hunt. And she also goes by the name of... See, the Roman name is Diana. What's the other? I forget. Y'all please help. Juno, being enraged, changes Callisto into a bear. And her own son, Arcus, being about to pierce her with an arrow, Jupiter places them both among the constellations. Bear. What is the constellation for a bear? And I know that there is the name Wyatt, which means bear, if that means anything to anybody. Juno, having complained of this to Oceanus, is borne back to the heavens by her peacocks, who have so lately changed their color. A thing which has also happened to the raven, which has been lately changed from white to black, he having refused to listen to the warnings of the crow, who relates the story of its own transformation, and of that Nictamine into an owl. All right, much transformation going on. I guess I'm not surprised. This is Metamorphosis. Let's see. Hold on. There we go. There we go, that's better. Juno, having complained of this to Oceanus, is borne back to the heavens by her peacocks, who have so lately changed their color. A thing which has also happened to the raven, which has been lately changed from white to black, he having refused to listen to the warnings of the crow, who relates the story of its own transformation, and of that to Nictamine into an owl. And having persisted in informing Phobos of the intrigues of Coronis, her son, Asclepius, being cut out of the womb of Coronis and carried to the cave of Chiron, the centaur, that being Sagittarius, Achiroi, pardon me, friends, for my ignorance of the pronunciations of some of these, the daughter of Chiron, is changed into a mare while she is prophesying. Her father in vain invokes the assistance of Apollo, for he, in the guise of a shepherd, is tending his oxen in the country of Elis. He, neglecting his herd, Mercury takes the opportunity of stealing it, after which he changes Battus into a touchstone for betraying him. Flying thence, Mercury beholds Herse, the daughter of Cecrops, and debauches her. Her sister Aglaurus, being envious of her, is changed into a rock. Mercury returns to heaven, on which Jupiter orders him to drive the herds of Agenor toward the shore, and then, assuming the form of a bull, he carries Europa over the sea to the Isle of Crete. Let's talk about that real quick. This word Europa. People might remember something called Identity Europa many years ago, and it was spelled with a V, and there was a keck being had about Identity Evropa. We know from Hebrew, from modern Hebrew, from Aramaic, that V is the pronunciation of the letter Bet. And so, where is V? It would be Ebropa. Ooh, I'm sorry, a little dirt on my nail. Anyway, this refers to the Hebrews. The Hebrews were carried over the sea to the Isle of Crete. Agenor commands his son Cadmus to seek his sister Europa. While he is doing this, he slays a dragon in Boeotia, and having sowed his teeth in the earth, men are produced, with whose assistance he builds the walls of Thebes. His first cause of grief is the fate of his grandson Actaeon, who, being changed into a stag, is torn to pieces by his own hounds. This, however, gives pleasure to Juno, who hates not only Semele, the daughter of Cadmus, and the favorite of Jupiter, but all the house of Agenor as well. Assuming the form of Beroa, she contrives the destruction of Semele by the lightnings of Jupiter. Look, it's the rare Cleopatra. Babe, show us your two faces. Hey, my beautiful thing. Okay, sorry. The favorite of Jupiter, okay. She gives pleasure to Juno, who hates not only Semele, the daughter of Cadmus, and the favorite of Jupiter, but all the house of Agenor as well. Assuming the form of Beroa, she contrives the destruction of Semele by the lightnings of Jupiter, while Bacchus, being saved alive from his mother's womb, is brought up on the earth. Jupiter has a discussion with Juno on the relative pleasure of the sexes, and they agree to refer the question to Tiresias, who has been of both sexes. He gives his decision in favor of Jupiter, on which Juno deprives him of sight, and by way of recompense, Jupiter bestows on him the gift of prophecy. His first prediction is fulfilled in the case of Narcissus, who, despising the advances of all females, in whose number is Echo, who has been transformed into a sound, at last pines away with love for himself, and is changed into a flower which bears his name. And to clarify, for those who don't know, that is the origin of narcissism, is being in love with oneself such that you stare at your own reflection until you wither away. I know much of this because I was a narcissist for many years. Nowadays they call it transgender. They call it other things as well. Pantheus, however, derides the prophet, who predicts his fate, and his predictions are soon verified, for on the celebration of the orgies, Bacchus, having assumed a disguise, is brought before him, and having related to Pentheus the story of the transformation of Etrurian sailors into dolphins, he is thrown into prison. On this, Pentheus is torn into pieces by the Bacchanals, and great respect is afterwards paid to the rites of Bacchus. Book 4. Still, Alcathoa and her sisters, neglecting the rites, attend to their spinning. Ooh, speaking of spinning, look up Seidr, S-E-I-D-R, or Seether, S-E-I-D-R. Spinning refers to witchcraft. She and her sisters, neglecting the rites, attend to their spinning during the festivities and pass the time in telling stories, and among others that of Pyramus and Thisbe, by whose blood the mulberry is turned from white to black, and that of the discovery of the intrigues of Mars and Venus on the information of the sun. They also tell how the sun assumed the form of Eurynomy, that he might enjoy her daughter. This is a... I can't say these words, brothers and sisters. Eurynomy, that he might enjoy her daughter Leucothoa, how Clytie, becoming jealous of her sister, was transformed into a sunflower, and how Salmacis and Hermaphroditus had become united in one body. After this, through the agency of Bacchus, the sisters are transformed into bats, and their webs are changed into vines. Ino, rejoicing at this, Juno, in her hatred and indignation, sends one of the Furies to her, who causes her to be struck with insanity, on which she leaps into the sea with her son Melicetra in her arms. But by the intercession of Venus, they become sea deities, and their Sidonian attendants, who are bewailing them as dead, are changed into rocks. Cadmus, afflicted at this fresh calamity, retires from Thebes and flies to Illyria, together with his wife, where they are both transformed into serpents. Interesting. Of those who despise Bacchus, Acrisius alone remains, the grandfather of Perseus, who, having cut off the head of the Gorgon Medusa, serpents are produced by her blood. Perseus turns Atlas into a mountain, and having liberated Andromeda, he changes seaweed into coral, and afterwards marries her. A tumult, this is book 5, a tumult arising during the celebration of the nuptials, Phineus claims Andromeda, who has been betrothed to him, and together with Protus, he and Polydectes are turned into stone. Pallas, who has aided Perseus, now leaves him and goes to Helicon to see the fountain of Hippocrene. The Muses tell her the story of Pyreneus and the Pyrides, who were transformed into magpies after they had repeated various songs on the subjects of the transformation of the deities into various forms of animals. The rape of Proserpine, and rape meaning abduction, the wanderings of Ceres, the change of Cain into a fountain, of a boy into a lizard, of Ascalphus into an owl, of the sirens into birds in part, of Arethusa into a spring, of Lycus into a lynx, and of the invention of agriculture by Triptolemus. Boy, everybody, why can't they just be themselves? Oy vey. Book 6. There we go. Influenced by the example of the Muses, Pallas determines on the destruction of Arachne. She enters with her into a contest for the superiority in the art of weaving. Each represents various transformations on her web. And by the way, weaving and this transformation of one thing into another, this is all witchcraft, this is all sorcery. I mean, we are reading about the construction of the world we live in today using symbolic language and the manipulation of words. Each represents various transformations on her web, and then Arachne is changed into a spider. Niobe, however, is not deterred thereby from preferring her own lot to that of Latona, on account of which all her children are slain by Apollo and Diana, and she is changed into a rock. On learning this, while one person relates the transformation by Latona of the Lycian rustics into frogs, another calls to mind how Marsyas was flayed by Apollo. Niobe is lamented by Pelops, whose shoulder is of ivory. To console the Thebans in their afflictions, ambassadors come from the adjacent cities. The Athenians alone are absent, as they are attacked by hordes of barbarians who are routed by Tereus, who marries Progne, the daughter of Pandion. Tereus, coming a second time to Athens, takes back with him to his kingdom Philomela, his wife's sister, and having committed violence on her with other enormities, he is transformed into a hoopoe, while Philomela is changed into a nightingale, and Progne becomes a swallow. Pandion, hearing of these wondrous events, dies of grief. Erechtheus succeeds him, whose daughter, Orithyia, is ravished by Boreas, and by him is the mother of Callias and Zethus, who are of the number of Argonauts on the following occasion. Okay, thank you, friends, for bearing with my struggle to pronounce these names. Jason, by the aid of Mede, having conquered the bulls that breathe forth flames, having sowed the teeth of a serpent, from which armed men are produced, and having lulled the dragon to sleep, recovers the golden fleece. Medea, accompanying Jason to Greece, restores Aeson to youth by the aid of drugs, and promising the same to Peleus, having first, as a specimen, changed a ram into a lamb, by stratagem she kills him, passing through many places made remarkable by various transformations. Ooh, ow, sorry. I hurt my back. Trying to get comfortable here. Having slain her children, she marries Aegeus. When Theseus returns home and narrowly escapes being poisoned by her magic potions, Minos interrupts the joy of Aegeus on the return of his son and wages war against him. Having collected troops from all parts, even the Paros where Arne has been changed into a jackdaw. What a jackdaw is! Minos endeavors to gain the alliance of Iacchus, who, however, refuses it, and sends the Myrmidons who have been changed into ants from men after a severe pestilence under the command of Cephalus to assist Aegeus. Now, by the way, look up these names and find out what they mean, because they're all symbolic of something. Cephalus relates to Phocus, the son of Achaeus, how being carried off by Aurora and assuming another shape, he had induced his wife Procrus to prove faithless, and how he had received from her a dog and a javelin, the form of which together with a fox was changed into stone, while the latter by inadvertence caused the death of his wife. In the meantime, Minos besieges Megara. See, Megara, I think of the lady from Disney's Hercules. Scylla, becoming enamored of him, betrays her country, the safety of which depends upon the purple lock of her father Nisu. After being afterwards rejected by Minos, she clings to his ship and is changed into a bird, while her father becomes a sea eagle. Minos returns to Crete, and having erected the labyrinth with the assistance of Daedalus, he there encloses the Minotaur, the disgrace of his family, and feeds it with his Athenian captives. Theseus, being one of these, slays the monster, and having escaped from the labyrinth by the aid of Ariadne, he takes her with him, but deserts her in the Isle of Dia, where Bacchus meets with her and places her crown among the constellations. Daedalus, being unable to escape from the island of Crete, invents wings and flies away, while Icarus, accompanying his father, is drowned. The partridge beholds the father celebrating his funeral rites and testifies his joy. Perdix, or Talus, who had been envied by Minos for his ingenuity, and had been thrown by him from the temple of Minerva, having been transformed into that bird. Theseus, having now become celebrated, is invited to the chase of the Caledonian boar, which Atalanta is the first to wound. Meleager slays the monster, and his death is accelerated by his mother Althea, who places in the fire the fatal billet. Returning from the expedition, Theseus comes to Achelos and sees the islands called Echidnas, Echinides, Echidnas, into which the naiads have been transformed. Yeah, I know that you want me to read it beforehand and figure out the pronunciation before I record it, but no, it's not practical. I'm reading a lot here, and just bear with me, brothers and sisters. Focus on the information, okay? That's why I'm showing you the words, so that you can see and that you can correct me and that we can do this together. Periothus denies the possibility of this. The possibility of what? Let us back up. Returning from the expedition, Theseus comes to Achelos and sees the island called Echinades, into which the naiads have been transformed. Periothus denies the possibility of this, but Leolix quotes as an example the case of Baucis and Philemon, who are changed into trees while their house became a temple and the neighboring country a pool of water. Baucis became a linden and Philemon became an oak. Achelous then tells us, do y'all know anything about linden trees? Tell me what you know about linden trees, because all that I could figure out about them is that the word Basque is cognate with the word fascis, and Basque refers to rope made from the inner bark of a linden tree, But I also know that Baucis here was made into a linden tree. Let me stop reading and tell you about them real quick. Baucis and Philemon were old people who live in a cabin high up on the hill or a mountain or whatever. And I think it's Jupiter and Mercury, they disguise themselves as beggars and go looking to see if there were any good-hearted people. And everybody turned them away except for Baucis and Philemon, who brought them inside, and they chased around and hunted their only goose to feed the beggars and gave them wine. And they did not realize until their wine never ran out that it was by the power of these beggars who were in truth the gods. Anyway, tell me what you know about the linden, please. Achilles then tells the story of the transformations of Proteus and of Metra, and how Metra supported her father, Erysichthon, while afflicted with violent hunger. Achilles then relates his own transformations when he was contending with Hercules for the hand of Deianira. Hercules wins her, and Nisus attempts to carry her off, on which Hercules pierces him with one of his arrows that has been dipped in the blood of the Hydra. In revenge, Nisus, as he is dying, gives to Deianira his garment stained with his blood. She, distrusting her husband's affection, sends him the garment. He puts it on, and his vitals are consumed by the venom. As he is dying, he hurls his attendant Lycus into the sea, where he becomes a rock. Dwayne Johnson comes to mind. Hercules is conveyed into heaven and is enrolled in the number of the deities. Alcmena, his mother, goes to her daughter-in-law, Iole, and tells her how Galanthus was changed into a weasel, while she, in her turn, tells the story of the transformation of her sister Dryope into the lotus. Interesting. The lotus. The Egyptian deity Sekhmet has a son called Nefertim, who is a lotus flower at the beginning of creation. And the lotus is revered in Buddhism and such because it is born in the mire at the bottom of a pool, and it shoots through the water and blossoms in the air on the surface, which is a symbol of Jesus Christ, transcending the water, which in Hebrew, mem, it means, in the Aramaic meaning is water, the Hebrew meaning is blood. So it's about transcending one's blood to be born again into the air. In the meantime, Iolaus comes, whose youth has been restored by Hebe. Jupiter shows by the example of his sons Acus and Menos that all are so blessed. Meletus, flying from Menos, arrives in Asia and becomes father of Byblis and Caunus. Byblis, that's a familiar word, isn't it? Falls in love with her brother and is transformed into a fountain. A fountain of living water, perhaps? This would have appeared more surprising to all if Iphis had not a short time before the day of her nuptials been changed into a man. Ugh. Poor girl. Happens all the time these days. Book 10. Hymenaeus attends these nuptials and then goes to those of Orpheus, but with a bad omen, as Eurydice dies soon after and cannot be brought to life. In his sorrow, Orpheus repairs to the solitudes of the mountains, where the trees flock around him at the sound of his lyre. Ooh, the trees flock around him at the sound of his lyre. And I think of imps. And among others, the pine into which Attis has been changed. Attis changed into a pine. Got it. And the cypress produced from the transformation of Cyparissus. Okay. Orpheus sings of the rape of Ganymede, rape meaning abduction, of the change of Hyacinthus, who was beloved and slain by Apollo, into a flower, of the transformation of the Ceristai into bulls, of the Propotides, who were changed into stones, and of the statue Pygmalion, who was changed into a living woman, who became mother of Paphos. He then sings how Myrrha, that is remarkably similar to the spelling of myrrh, which means bitterness, which was brought before the infant Jesus. Y'all keeping up? He then sings how Myrrha, for her incestuous intercourse with her father, was changed into the myrrh tree, and how Adonis, to whom Venus relates the transformation of Hippomenes and Atalanta into lions, was transformed into an anemone. So look, if we look up these names and these words that we don't understand, which I'm sure Wiktionary.com will help you, this is going to uncover the meaning of everything. Book 11. Orpheus is torn to pieces by the Thracian woman, on which a serpent which attacks his face is changed into a stone. Women are transformed into trees by Bacchus, who deserts Thrace and betakes himself to Phrygia, where Midas, for his care of Silenus, receives the power of making gold. He loathes this gift, and bathing in the river Pactolus, its sands become golden. For his stupidity, his ears are changed by Apollo into those of an ass. An ass, by the way, we read about the asses here. Ass is a singular of Aesir. Aesir. Then gathered together the gods for council, the holy hosts, and held converse. Should the Aesir a truce with tribute buy? Jesus enters New Jerusalem on the foal of an ass. An ass is an individual god. So, for his stupidity, his ears are changed by Apollo into those of an ass. After this, that god goes to Troy and aids Laomedon in building its walls. Hercules rescues his daughter Hesione when fastened to a rock, and his companion Telamon receives her as his wife, while his brother Peleus marries the sea goddess Thetis. Going to visit Cakes, he learns how Daedalian has been changed into a hawk, and sees a wolf changed into a rock. Cakes goes to consult the oracle Claros and perishes by shipwreck. On this, Morpheus appears to Halicone in the form of her husband, and she is changed into a kingfisher, which is a bird, into which Cakes is also transformed. Persons who observe them as they fly call to mind how Asacus, the son of Priam, was changed into a seabird called the didapper. Priam performs the obsequies for Asacus, believing him to be dead. The children of Priam attend, with the exception of Paris, who, having gone to Greece, carries off Helen, the wife of Menelaus. The Greeks pursue Paris, but are detained at Aulis, where they see a serpent changed into stone, and prepare to sacrifice Iphigenia to Diana. But a hind is substituted for her. The Trojans, hearing of the approach of the Greeks in arms, await their arrival. At the first onset, Cygnus, dashed by Achilles against a stone, is changed by Neptune into the swan, a bird of the same name, he having been vulnerable by no weapon. At the banquet of the chiefs, Nestor calls to mind Canius, who was also invulnerable, and who, having been changed from a woman into a man, on being buried under a heap of trees, was transformed into a bird. This Canius was one of the Lapithae at the battle of whom, which the centaurs, Nestor was present. Nestor also tells how his brother Periclymenus was changed into an eagle. Meanwhile, Neptune laments the death of Cygnus and entreats Apollo to direct an arrow of Paris against the heel of Achilles, which is done, and that hero is slain. Ajax, Telamon, and Ulysses contend, and this is book 13. Ajax, Telamon, and Ulysses contend for the arms of Achilles. The former slays himself, on which a hyacinth springs up from his blood. Troy being taken, Hecuba is carried to Thrace, where she tears out the eyes of Polymnestor and is afterwards changed into a bitch. No kidding. While the gods deplore her misfortune, Aurora is occupied with grief for the death of her son Memnon, from whose ashes the birds called Memnonides arise. Aeneas, flying from Troy, visits Aeneas, whose daughters have been changed into doves, and after touching at their places remarkable for various transformations, he arrives in Sicily, where is the maiden Scylla, to whom Galatea relates how Polyphemus courted her, and how he slew Acis. On this, Glaucus, who has been changed into a sea deity, makes his appearance. Circe changes Scylla into a monster. Aeneas arrives in Africa and is entertained by Dido. Passing by the islands called Pithecusae, where the Cecropes, Seceropes, I hope y'all educate me about how some of these things are pronounced, have been transformed from men into apes. Ooh. He comes to Italy, and landing near the spot which he calls Caeta, he learns from Macarius many particulars respecting Ulysses and the incantations of Circe, and how King Picus was changed into a woodpecker. He afterwards wages war with Turnus. Through Venulus, Turnus asks assistance of Diomedes, whose companions have been transformed into birds, and he is refused. Remember, a bird in the New Testament is one who snatches the truth out of a man before it takes root. Venulus, as he returns, sees the spot where an Apulian shepherd has been changed into an olive tree. Interesting. Apulian shepherd changed into an olive tree. The ships of Areus, then on fire, become sea nymphs, just as a heron formerly arose from the flames of the city Ardea. Aeneas is now made a deity. Other kings succeed him, and in the time of Procas, Pomona lives. She is beloved by Vertumnus, who first assumes the form of an old woman, and having told the story of Anacharete, who was changed into a stone for her cruelty, he resumes the shape of a youth and prevails upon the goddess. Cold waters, by the aid of Naidas, become warm. Romulus, having succeeded Numentor, he is made a deity under the name of Quirinus, where his wife Hersilia becomes the goddess Hora. Okay, so I didn't realize that Romulus is a Greek figure. Book 5. Numa succeeds. Numa is breath. Numa succeeds, who, and by breath I mean spirit. Numa succeeds, who on making inquiry respecting the origin of the city of Crotona, learns how black pebbles were changed into white. He also attends the lectures of Pythagoras and the changes which all matter is eternally undergoing. And remember, pebbles and rocks and such are symbols of people. Egeria laments the death of Numa and will not listen to the consolations of Hippolytus, who tells her own of his own transformation, and she pines away into a fountain. This is not less wonderful than how Tejas sprang from a clod of earth, or how the lance of Romulus became a tree, or how Kippus became decked with horns. The poet concludes by passing the recent events, and after showing how Aesculapius was first worshipped by the Romans in the sacred isle of the Tiber, he relates the deification of Julius Caesar and his change into a star, and foretells imperishable fame for himself. Whoa! Very info-dense. I mean, we just went through the first 15 books of the Metamorphosis of Ovid. I need to get the actual thing. I need to know what it all says. Now we're going to get into this. The argument. My design leads me to speak of forms changed into new bodies. You gods, for you it was who changed them, favor my attempts and bring down the lengthened narrative from the very beginning of the world, even to my own times. God reduces chaos into order. He separates the four elements and dispossesses the several bodies of which the universe is formed into their proper situations. At first, the sea, the earth, and the heaven, which covers all things, were the only face of nature throughout the whole. Are you kidding me? This is all... into the whole verse. Wow, what giant footnotes. Which men have named chaos, a rude and undigested mass, and nothing more than an inert weight, and the discordant atoms of things. Look, I'm thinking we save that one for a next video. So I will upload this, and then we'll have that synopsis of the first 15 chapters. Then we're going to get into the author of this synopsis's explanation. So the following video is actually going to explain the meaning of all that weird stuff we just read. See you there. Oh, look at the babies. Look at the brothers and sister.